Hi, this is Denise Matthew, and today I have the Beginner's Guide HD 101 to how to read your human design chart. Now, there's a lot of stuff to learn in human design, and this only brushes the surface, but I tried to give a taste of all the different flavors in the chart, and I hope it will be helpful. Now, it may take a few times or a few runs through to get all the information down, and that's okay. Take your time as much as you need or as little as you need. The whole thing about it is that it's a resource for you so that you can decide what you want to do with your chart, what you want to read. I put a tremendous amount of work and energy into this project, and I really hope it will be helpful to you. But truth be known, there's no way I could cover all the things in human design in one video or even 100 videos. There's just too much to go through. But hopefully this will give you something to grab onto, and it will get you even closer to learning your human design. So let's get into it. And as I said before, if my voice is too fast because I get sort of into the moment of explaining things and I get faster and faster, then please feel free to use the YouTube playback speed, because that can slow the video down, the speed down, so that you can get the information that you need and not feel overwhelmed by the speed. The first thing you need to do is get your own human design chart. All you need is your birth date, your birth time, and your place of birth. Now, not everybody has their birth time, and that's okay for the most part. You can usually get a vibe for your chart. Now, the moon may change based on the time because it does actually transit a few gates as the day 24 hours goes by. But ultimately, it will give you hopefully a flavor. But I do have a video that's on my channel, and I'll put the link below, so that can help you if you don't have your birth time to try and figure out exactly what your birth time is or what your chart looks like in human design. Now, the place to get the human design chart is right here. So there's a lot of free resources. And of course, there's always going to be paid subscriptions to different places or paid apps. But for the most part, you can get a lot of information from humandesignamerica.com. And you can also go to jovianarchives.com. Now, those places will always give you a free chart. And sometimes I think if you sign up for things, they'll give you sort of a small reading of your chart, just talking about your centers and a few other things. The only downside to the Human Design America is that it doesn't have any dates that go any earlier than 19, I think 17 or thereabouts. So if you want to get a birth chart for somebody who was born in the early 1900s, like super early, or the 1800s or something like that, then you'll need to go to the Jovian archives, and that works really well. Another site I really like is Genetic Matrix. Now, this is something that they've just started doing some paid subscriptions, and they have a lot of options if you do have the paid subscription, but yet they still do have the free chart. Now, the free chart looks a little different. As you can see, I have an image here. So it depends upon what chart you're looking at, but ideally, if you have an idea and you look at all the charts and you can see the parts of the charts despite what they look like, that's going to be helpful to you in the long run. Now, Human Design app, they just updated their app, and their app now has the sacral as a round circle. Now, this is, as far as I know, the only app or the only body graph that exists out there with a circle for a sacral. And it is a little unusual for me to see it, but I mean, they do have a lot of information in the app, and to me, it's worth it. When I bought it, it was about $10, and it goes on pretty much any iOS. But again, it's not necessary. But if you want to have something at your fingertips all the time, and it also gives you the ability to store your data or store people's data. Now, if you don't already have your chart, this would be the time to go and get one, and we can start going through it. The way I've broken down this video is I've started with the type, then went to the strategy. What I wanted to do was start with a broad overview of the type, because that's the broadest of all the things in human design, and then we slowly get into the more specific parts of the chart. This is not for everybody. If you like it a different way, you can jump ahead. I will have timestamps, so you can just go wherever you want to go and bring it all together the way you like to bring it together. But I just did this in a systemic way, sort of methodically, so that I could get through everything and make sure I didn't miss anything. And then you can take the information, use what you want, because many people will know their type strategy already. And, you know, they want to know more about the gates, channels, whatever. Ultimately, this is your tool to use the way you want it, and that's the way I've designed it, and I hope that that's exactly what you get. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're just briefly going to talk about type, because I did full videos on all the different types, but I will go over them just so we'll just get through every little part of the chart so that we can take it apart and show us the secrets that it wants to show us. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're just briefly going to talk about type, because I did full videos on all the different types, but I will go over them just so we'll just get through every little part of the chart so that we can take it apart and show us the secrets that it wants to show us. And here's just a plain human design chart from Jovian Archives. And if you can notice, it's written right there, so you'll know exactly where to find your type. And it just says right there, manifester. First thing you want to know is your type. There's only 5 different types, so you're always going to be one of these different types. There are 2 generator types. The generator types always have a red square at the bottom of the chart or a red sacral. So you'll always know somebody who's a generator type. A reflector will always have all white centers, no color at all in the centers, other than they can have a little red or black in the channels. Now, a projector and a manifestor are a little bit more difficult to sort of see and know exactly their type, but it will always be written on all of your charts that you have, so there's no concern about not knowing what your type is. So let's go through the types and just quickly how a type is determined to be a specific type. So if somebody's a projector, it means that they're not going to have a motorized throat, and it also means that they're going to have an open sacral, which is the white square. Instead of being red like a generator type, it will be white, and there is no access to a motor to the throat. We will talk more about what that actually means later on, but for now, that's just the way they determine somebody who's a projector type. Now, there are 2 types of generator types. One is called the manifesting generator, and the other is called a pure generator type. So if we see, they both have the red squares, which will always say that they're generator types. Although the person who's the manifesting generator, they have access to a motor to the throat. So that means the energy from a motor, in this case the sacral, goes through all the channels. There's a complete road, and it gets directly to the throat. The other one, if you notice, that person has no access of a motor to the throat. They also have what's called an open throat, but they could also have a brown square, which means a defined throat, but also not have the access to the motor. So that's exactly how you would tell the difference. And this may be more difficult to see in the beginning when you're first looking at charts, but again, it will always be written on your chart. And it's kind of fun to practice looking at how the channels go and how the energy flows. So because it's all about energy flowing to the throat, and it's all about motors to the throat and motors not to the throat. And that is exactly how they determine the types in human design. This is a manifestor type. We know that somebody is a manifestor type. Number 1, they have to have a white square instead of a red square for a sacral. So their sacral has to be undefined. They also need to have a motor to the throat. So here we have the will center going directly to the throat, and what that means is that this person is a manifestor. Now, I will talk more about motors later on, but just to see why a manifestor is considered a manifestor, and that there is a difference between somebody who's a projector type based on 100% only the motor to the throat. And a reflector will always have all white open centers and what are called hanging gates. I'll talk more about hanging gates a little bit later on, but basically they're just half channels all over the chart. And as you can see, when somebody's a reflector type, it's pretty easy to recognize based on everything is open and everything is white. So now we know about the type, let's move on to the strategy. And this is pretty much the bread and butter of human design. Everything goes back to the strategy. So using your strategy, in theory, will give you the best experience in life. And just so you know where to find it on the chart, again, the same chart, and this is just telling you the strategy. And for a manifestor, the strategy is to inform. I've added a lot of information, written information for this video so that if you want to do a screenshot and have it for your reference, it's easy to have it for reference. Now, this is the whole list of in a nutshell, of the strategies. And in human design, a strategy is considered a way of interacting with the world, reading signs around you, or a way of interacting with people to get the best experience in life. And if there's anything that can be said about strategy, most times when you don't know your strategy, you're going to be doing the exact opposite of your strategy. So what I talk about for each type, if you're that particular type and you're brand new to human design, you may have seen yourself going exactly opposite to what the strategy for that particular type is. It's very common. And so when you know that maybe a little tweak in the way you're acting in the world, or a big tweak based on who you are, can help you get the best in life and getting the best responses from people, and really bringing those things that you want into your life in a more abundant way, then it kind of becomes a lot more important. If you're a manifestor type, which is a small percentage of the population, as you can see, it's only 8 to 10%. What that means is only the manifestors are what's called the true initiators. Everybody has heard the catchphrases, oh, just go out and do it. And ultimately, that's what manifestors are all about, just going out and doing it. Their only boss is basically the universe, God, or whatever you want to call it. Something bigger than them is where they're going to get the information for where they're meant to go and what they're meant to do, unless they have an emotional authority, and we will talk about that later on. But if they have an emotional authority, then that would be something that's going to help direct their energy. But ultimately, it's all about creating opportunities, and really manifestors are here to initiate all the rest of us in our lives. So when you come in contact with somebody who's a manifestor, you will be in some way usually initiated. And if you're a manifestor, or if you are someone who knows a manifestor, the one thing you will know is that when you have this energy of the manifestor, you move very fast, very quick. Everything is like speed, speed, speed. And really the world doesn't move as fast as you. And there could be some frustration with people not knowing where you're going, what you're doing. And usually when you're a manifestor type, the last thing you want to do is tell people what you're doing. But that's where the strategy comes in, because ultimately, as a manifestor, you're here to initiate and do what you want to do. But if you're not informing people who are affected by your decision, there can be some ruffled feathers. So for instance, if you're going around and you're preparing for a big dinner, and it's a big anniversary dinner, and you're with your partner and you're having a big dinner, and you've prepared it all as a manifestor, and you say, okay, come on over and show up. And unfortunately, the other partner is somebody who is very busy with work, and they haven't made any arrangements to actually be free. And what happens is everything blows up in your face because they don't know what's going on, and you haven't informed them, even though everything that you're doing is coming from the best part of you, and you're trying to make it really a very special time. But unfortunately, because there was no informing, the other person doesn't show up to the dinner, everything goes sideways, and it becomes an experience that could have been so much better had the manifestor, or you as a manifestor, told that person that is important to you, that is affected by your decision, that, okay, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to get it all arranged. And when the informing is part of the puzzle, then things get a lot easier for you. So now we get to projectors, and they're only 20% of the population. Now their job is really to be managers and directors of people, and not everybody wants to be managed and directed, because it's all about the delivery of the information. When projectors are out there doing their thing, and they're telling people, because they actually know a lot of information, they're telling generator types, because that's who they're here to manage and direct, because manifestors don't have any bosses other than something bigger than them. So projectors, they're here to manage the generators and sort of guide them along the way. Now, not all generators want to be guided because just the nature of being human, we always want to sort of do our own thing. And for a projector type, the best way to get the information that is so important that the generator types will need very much to get through and to help out and to sort of maneuver and manage life is something that needs to be recognized or invited out of a projector. And what that means is that instead of a projector saying, oh, I know how to do it, instead, if they say, would you like me to tell you how you can do this better? Or would you like my advice on this? Or in any way, they're getting some sort of a green light to give the wisdom and the knowledge that they know, then they're going to have a better experience. Now, when it comes to the big things in life, and we're talking big things, we're talking marriage, we're talking getting a new house, we're talking, not small events in their lives. It's all about being recognized and invited in to those opportunities. And that is what many projector types will struggle with. And I think there's not many types that are not going to struggle with this whole concept of waiting for something to happen. For projectors, it's about waiting for an invitation. So they know what they want, and they've been always told, and we've all been told, just go out and do it. And we're not manifestors. So if we are a manifestor, absolutely. But if we're not, there's a different way, and that is the strategy. So for a projector, it is preparing for those big events, knowing in your heart that you will be called on, you will be recognized, and you will get the invitation. And it may seem like forever, but ultimately, when you know in your heart and believe it with all your being that things will start to move in the direction that they're meant to, and that life has a cycle and a trajectory for you, then you can sit a little easier in your strategy, knowing that you're going to be able to give the best, and your best will always get even better when it's preceded by a recognition or an invitation. Now, when we get to the generator types, we're talking about somebody who is any generator type is always going to be a worker. Now, the difference between a generator type and a manifesting generator type is, as I said before, the motorized throat. And that makes a huge difference. The difference is when you don't have a motorized throat, and this also goes for projector types as well. Ultimately, whenever you want to get involved in a conversation, or you want to start talking to somebody, being recognized or acknowledged or even invited into a conversation will always work better for you to be giving your best, and people accepting and being actually very happy and engaged in what you have to say. Again, that's all related to the motorized throat. You're just heard easier. A manifestor is always going to be heard easier because they have a motorized throat. They can initiate conversations, and they will be heard a lot easier because of this motorized throat, as well as the manifesting generators. But when we talk about a generator type or a projector type, we're talking about somebody who doesn't have a constant supply of energy to their throat. And for this reason, being invited into a conversation is important. Pure generator types are very diligent and methodical workers, or can be, and that sort of, they take their time. They do what they want to do at the pace that they set for themselves. They're not usually in a rush, although there can be places in a chart that will make people rush. So this isn't a blanket statement. We're talking about a very broad stroke brush, and we're, as I said, going to bring it back in a little bit deeper and a little bit more specific as we move forward. But by nature, a generator type will work at a steady pace, and they will just take their goals and they'll move towards it. They're not in a huge rush. The thing about when you're looking as a generator type and your strategy is all about waiting for the signs and then responding or not. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you have an idea for something you want to bring into your world. Okay, so maybe you want to take a course and you don't know if you really want to do it. And so what happens is you say, okay, I want to take a course, and you just start thinking about it, and then you're waiting for a sign from the universe. Now that sign doesn't come from your mind, because your mind will always tell you what you want it to tell you. The signs come from outside of you. The signs come from an email in your inbox that says there's a course being offered and there's a certain percentage off. And that is your sign that says, yes, this course is correct for you. So what happens is you decide, yes, I want to respond to this, or no, I don't want to. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying wait for the signs and then respond or not. This is the same strategy for a manifesting generator, but there's a little bit of a tweak there, and we'll talk about that right now. So we've already talked about the manifesting generator and the manifestors being heard easier, so they can initiate conversations. Now, we've already said that a generator type, it's the same in that you have this waiting for a sign after you envision something, and then, you respond or not. Now, there's a difference here between somebody who's a manifesting generator and somebody who's a generator, and that's really big. The thing about manifesting generators is they have a combination of a manifestor energy and also a generator energy. So the manifestor energy makes them very fast. Manifestors move at the speed of light, and manifesting generators can almost be like that as well. They move very fast. But unlike a manifestor, a manifesting generator is not a manifestor, and yet they may sometimes believe they are. And what that means is they might be going out initiating things instead of actually doing the generator strategy, which is all about envisioning, waiting for signs. Where we have the difference between the manifesting generators and the generator types is that a manifesting generator will need to inform those who are affected by their decisions of the decision that they're going to respond to, or of something they're going to respond to. Now, it's only going to be the people that are affected by their decision. It's not necessary to have an email sent out to everyone on your contact list. Anybody who is going to be affected by your decision needs to be informed, because if a decision that you're going to make has somebody else driving you to the new job you're going to take, and you haven't told that person who's supposed to drive you to that new job that you're going to take the new job and they're going to be responsible for driving, you can imagine that it's not going to work out well. But that person who's driving you, or you want to drive you, could possibly have no issue with driving you, but certainly wants to know that you are actually making a decision on their behalf as well. So this is why it's important. Manifesting generators move very fast, as I said, and the thing about them is that they will jump steps, and they will go faster and miss things and then have to go back and then repeat it. It's very common because there's always this rush to move forward, move forward, move forward. The one thing about manifesting generators is to know that they have to wait to respond to things in the outside universe, and to realize that they are not manifestors and they are not here to initiate. But when they get the strategy down pat, they look for the signs, they wait for something to respond to, they inform those who they're going to be affected by it, and then they respond, life gets easier. Reflector types are the least common type of all the human design types, only 1 to 2%. The thing about a reflector type is you're somebody who has a very unique way of being in the world, and you would be considered somebody who's a lunar being, or somebody who has a deep connection with the moon. And I've heard a lot of reflectors say that even before they found human design, they have always sort of had this connection with the moon cycles. And so it's a very cyclical energy. It's all about the 28 to 29 day moon cycle. Now, what happens when you're a reflector is you're a barometer for the whole health of your community. In other words, somebody who's a reflector type working in an office who is really unhappy with, is feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, very unhappy, is saying that the whole office of people are feeling that same way. So it's really like the canary in the coal mine. It's showing where there is goodness or where things are not as good as they could be. And so that's the common thing with somebody who's a reflector type. There's so much open energy. All those white centers are considered open energy. So it means that a reflector is taking in a lot of information, and they're getting imprinted by a lot of information and a lot of energy at all times. For a reflector, their strategy is all about the 28 to 29 day moon cycle. And what that is that for the big important decisions in their life, they need, or they would be preferred to wait a full moon cycle to make the big decisions in their life. And what happens is, as they go through each day and the moon goes through all the different gates of the 64 gates of the whole mandala, or the whole of the human design system, in 28 to 29 days, they'll get a feel for if that decision is right for them. And if after those 28 days or 29 days, the moon cycle is completed and they feel like, yes, this is what I want to do, then it's just about going off and doing that thing, whatever it is. I do have a full video on how to work with your moon cycle and actually how to figure it out as a reflector, as well as the extra videos of reflector type as well. So reflectors are really important to our community, but because of all the energy that's always bombarded at them from all the rest of us, or all the people who are not reflectors, it can be a little bit tough. So the big key with reflectors is to have alone time and to spend time in nature as much as they can, because that can get them back into the sort of the balanced area where they can start to feel more like they're not being overwhelmed by the energy of the world. And when they're healthy and when things are going well, they can have an amazing effect, and they're a very pivotal and important part of our community as a whole. Now we know the type, we know the strategy, so let's go and start talking about the authority. So if we're looking for the authority on the chart, you'll see it right here that I have it circled, so that you can have that idea of exactly where all this information is on your chart, so you can see exactly where you stand and what your authority is. In the basics of human design, and what human design theory says are most important, is knowing your type and then your strategy on how to interact with the world. The authority is another dimension that adds in more clarity on the decisions that you make, because based on our emotions, our decisions can be changed. So there's several different types of authorities. Some are specific to manifestors, some are specific to projectors, some are specific to generator types. So let's get started. So if we look at the data from Jovian Archives based on August 2020, you can see that 46% or almost 50% of people have a solar plexus, or a defined solar plexus, or a defined emotional center, which means they have emotional authority, which means all the rest of the people have a different type of authority, or they don't have the emotional wave to talk about. So it means that 50% have emotional authority and 50% don't. And that talks about 50% of people being able to make a decision immediately in the moment as soon as it feels right based on their strategy, and 50% of the people needing more clarity to find the decision that works best for them. So let's get into more about what that means, and we can talk about the authorities and how they can dramatically affect the way we make the decisions in our lives so that we can get a better outcome. So let's briefly go through the authorities so we can understand what they are, how they differ, and how they can work for us. So the first thing that we know whenever we look at a body graph, and it will be written as I showed you already on the chart, so you'll know what your authority is. But if you're just looking at the body graph without looking at the chart details or anything that's written, you're going to notice that you will have either a white triangle on the right hand side, or a open emotional center, or you will have a brown triangle on the right hand side, or a defined emotional center. And this is a huge part of authority in human design. What that means, and this is for all types of course, except for reflectors, because reflectors don't have any defined centers. So all types that have a defined emotional center need to wait for clarity, or it is preferred that you wait for clarity. And what that means is that because of the emotional wave, or our emotions that we have based on having a defined emotional center, we have an oscillation of our moods, or you could say that you have your up days and you have your down days when you have a solar plexus that's defined. Now that's not to say that somebody who has an open center or a white center or an undefined solar plexus doesn't have some level of emotions. But what we're saying is that the person with the defined solar plexus, they are transmitting the emotions. They are feeling the emotions themselves, but they're energetically transmitting that energy out, and that anybody who has an open solar plexus, they can pick that energy up. And not only do they pick it up, but they amplify it, they make it bigger. So yes, somebody with an emotional center that's open or undefined will 100% have emotions and feel emotions. We will talk about that more later on when we go through the centers, but I just wanted to talk about what it means to have a defined emotional center. Now, the emotional wave is something that's important to know when you are talking about your authority. And I'm going to go through that so that we can get that clear. And I'm going to spend a little more time on this just because it is so important. So if we know that 50% of the population have emotional authority and 50% of the population don't, we can say one thing for certain. 50% of the population need to wait for clarity before jumping into a decision. And 50% of the population who don't have emotional authority can make a decision in the moment if it feels good. So that's a really big thing to know. And it's as simple as that. If you have a brown triangle on the right side of the chart, or a defined emotional center or solar plexus, then that means you need time to make decisions, because you need time to go through your emotional waves to find clarity. And if you don't have a defined emotional center, or it's open or it's white, that means that you can make a decision in the moment to do something that you want to do. So it's as simple as that. So if you can remember that you are open, or if you're closed in the emotional center, you're going to know right away that your strategy is something you'll continue to use. And you can use your strategy in the moment if you're open. And if you're defined, then you're going to take your strategy and you're going to go through your wave. And then once you go through your wave, then you're going to go back to your strategy. So in human design, our emotional waves are considered the ups and downs that we have in our emotions. So our highest highs and our lowest lows, and pretty much everything in between, is what makes up an emotional wave. Based on human design theory, emotional waves only happen for people who have defined emotional centers. The way people who have an emotional wave make decisions is by waiting. Instead of jumping into decisions, there is a waiting period, and it's all about getting clarity about the decisions we have to make in our lives. The waiting period is meant to be for the duration of our emotional wave, but most people who have a defined emotional wave don't want to wait, and instead want to jump in an opportunity, and 9 out of 10 times they regret their decision. Like I just mentioned, the emotional waves are considered the ups and downs of our emotions. A full emotional wave will undulate through the whole gambit of emotions, from our highest highs to our lowest lows, and then it will start again. All waves are not considered equal, so knowing your specific wave and all its peaks and dips will help you navigate your decision-making process. What this means is that if you have an opportunity, then you will usually have a better experience if you don't decide right away, and if possible, take the time you need to go through all the highs and lows of your moods. The theory is that you should feel positive about the opportunity that you are thinking about for your full wave. And if you do, the action, response, or invitation is correct for you. If, on the other hand, at some part of your wave you feel it's not a good decision for you, then it's probably better to let the opportunity go. So for a manifester with an emotional wave, it's all about making an opportunity happen and waiting to go through their wave to see if it's correct for them. If it feels correct all the way through, they can go ahead, inform those who will be impacted, and then initiate. For projectors, it's about getting an invitation and going through their whole wave to see if it feels correct for them. And if it does, they can accept the invitation. If not, they can reject it. For generator types, it's about getting something to respond to and then going through their wave to feel if it's something they want to respond to or not. And if they do, they can respond to it. Otherwise, they can let the opportunity go. So now we're going to go through all the other authorities that are not emotional. And as I said before, the most important thing with these types of authorities is if in the moment it feels good, then the answer is yes. And I'll just talk about each one as we go through, and the extra added cues on how to figure it out if it's right for you. And the funniest thing about authority is this: people who have emotional authority usually want to jump into decisions right away, and people who have authority that isn't emotional generally want to wait on something. So you have people who have emotional authority jumping in and doing something and sort of regretting it afterwards. And then you have people who have non-emotional authority and they just want to sit on an opportunity. And a lot of times they'll miss out on it. So if you can use these cues that I'm going to give you to help out, it may make making decisions a lot easier for you, and also something where you get better results in the long run. The next most common authority is sacral authority, also called generator authority. And just like it sounds, only generator types have this type of authority, since it's only found in people with defined sacrals. As well as having a defined sacral, they also need to have an open emotional center, also called an undefined emotional center or solar plexus. So when we're talking about a generated sacral authority, we're really talking about a gut feeling of something being correct for you. A lot of people will talk about, my gut told me it was the right thing to do. So generators can have a lot of this gut feeling kind of energy that says, yes, this is correct for me. So if something shows up in your outside world and you want to respond to it, if it feels right in that moment and you get a hit, an internal hit that says, yes, this is correct for me, then that would be correct for you, because you don't need to go through an emotional wave. Now, human design also bring in another strategy, a part of the strategy, and it's called the sacral sounds. The sacral sounds are uh-huh and uh-uh. So it's a positive or a negative sound that generator types can make to see if something is correct for them. So for instance, when you're using sacral sounds as a generator type, you usually will have somebody ask you questions, and instead of actually thinking about the answers, you'll say uh-huh or uh-uh. And what usually will happen is you'll bypass the mind, and the gut or your internal instinct will say, yes, this is right for me, or no, this isn't right for me. So that's what the basis of sacral sounds are. Some people have energy, some generator types have energy that's so fast that the sacral sounds just aren't right for them. They're just too slow. So they can say yes or no, or they might have another cue. The sacral sounds, although a lot of people like them, they're not for everybody. So if you have a different way of bypassing the mind to get an internal hit of yes or no, then that's what you would use. The sacral sounds are for some people, as I said, and others don't like them. But ultimately, as long as you're getting an internal hit or some level of a yes or no that your body's telling you, that not your mind is telling you, then you will get the correct decision for you in the moment, and you will have the clarity. But you don't need clarity over time. It's in that moment. You say yes or no, uh-huh or uh-uh to something that you want to respond to. These next authorities that I'll be talking about are usually only found in manifestors or projector types, which means they're more rare, and they also require a little more finesse to get in touch with them. So when we talk about the splenic authority, both manifestors and projectors can have this authority. When a projector or manifestor type have this authority, then the emotional center and sacral are both undefined and the spleen is defined. The spleen is considered an intuitive center and all about the now. So the splenic response to an action or invitation is very quick and instant and in the moment. It's believed that the splenic response comes as a very quiet internal blip that isn't repeated. And just like the sacral response, the splenic response is an immediate yes or no hit. And it comes after an invitation is offered for a projector or after an action is being contemplated for a manifestor. What that means is that when someone has this authority, there's a need to get in touch with themselves and their internal cues. Usually, the way to start to track how your individual splenic response alerts you is by figuratively going back in time and remembering ways that your body reacted in response to an action or invitation, and seeing what cues showed up when you made a decision that you felt worked out positively, and alternately, when you made a decision that didn't live up to your expectations. The more you get attuned to the subtle signs that your body gives you, the more you will come to understand your splenic response. The next authority is called the ego, or ego manifested authority. This authority is only for manifestor types and means that the sacral, spleen, and emotional center are undefined, and the will center is defined to the throat. The will center can also be called the ego center or the heart center, so this authority is all about the heart's desire. Since manifestors are the only true initiators of all the types, when the will is defined to the throat, there's a need to connect with an internal desire, what they truly want. The concept here is that if they truly want something and the idea of having it makes their heart sing, then they can go out and initiate and make it happen. The caveat is that because the will center is considered a work to rest center, or there is a need to rest after having done a certain quantity of work, then when you as a manifester have this authority, it's best to manage and work with your energy so you don't get burnt out, because someone with a defined will can easily go beyond their physical capabilities, since willpower is a force to be reckoned with. Ego projected authority is when you are a projector with a defined ego or will center. Again, this talks about your heart's desire. In other words, whether your invitation aligns with your heart's desire or something that you truly want as a projector type. And since wording can be odd in human design sometimes, I just want to say that there's nothing about being projected out or anything like that. This is all about being a projector and having a defined ego. That's all it means. And just like ego manifested authority, it's really important for a projector type to check in on the energy piece to make sure they have the energy for the invitation before they decide to accept it. Because just like with a manifester, the will center can push somebody to go beyond their limitations and they can get burnt out or even sick. And because of the powerful nature of the will center, this can happen with any of the human design types. The next authority is called self-projected authority. This authority comes when the sacral, spleen, emotional center, and will center are all undefined, and the G center or identity center are defined and connected to the throat. This authority is only for projectors. When you have this as your authority, talking with others and bouncing the information off other people can assist you in decision making, because by seeing the reaction that your words elicit, you can gauge whether an invitation is correct for you or not. Another very similar authority that I will group in here as well, since it requires talking about an invitation, is mental projected authority. This isn't found in all body graphs, but it is found in some, so I just thought I would mention it. It's when the throat is defined to the ajna, and sometimes this is called no authority based on whatever chart you're looking at. And this authority is exactly the same as the self-projected authority, where a person is going to talk about their invitations with somebody. And the other way that this authority can show up is when the head and ajna are defined as well. And one very important part of the self-projected authority or the mental authority is that when a projector is talking about their invitations to people, it's really important for them to get somebody who they trust and who they respect their opinions. The old saying, don't throw your pearls before swine, is very apt when a projector decides who to pick to talk to. The last authority is no authority, also called outer authority, which is when there is no definition other than the head and ajna. Sometimes the throat is defined as well. It's really based on where the body graph is generated from. Like I just mentioned, some body graphs will call this mental authority when the ajna and head are defined and nothing else is really defined. And just like the self-projected authority, when a projector receives an invitation, they can talk about their invitation with trusted people, and based on the response of the trusted people, they can accept or reject the invitation. And one more thing to say is that a projector decides for themselves whether or not they want to accept an invitation. It's always going to be about free will. They don't have to decide based on other people's reactions or not. This is just the authority, and it can be helpful to them, but if they don't find it helpful, that works as well. Ultimately, it's about finding your own way and doing what's right for you. Since reflectors are unique in the way they interact with the world and are considered, as I said before, lunar beings, reflectors don't have an additional layer of authority. They have their 28-day or 29-day moon cycle, and that's pretty much the way they make their decisions, because it is a long process, and it does give a lot more clarity because it's a whole 28 to 29 day cycle or a moon cycle. So in that way, a reflector doesn't have an inner authority, but they do have their moon cycle, and that's how they make their decisions. Now we know the type, we know the strategy. Now we're going to move into the profile. And I have an individual video on every one of the profiles. So once again, I'm just going to do a quick review of it, just so that if you haven't watched any of those videos, you can get the information. But if you want more information, check them out, and I will leave the link below. So let's get started. So the profile is going to give us another layer of our human design chart. This is going to talk even more about the specifics of who we are. So we start with our type and our strategy, and now we're going into just one of the 12 profiles. So the 12 profiles are broken into 3 different types. the left angle profile, the right angle profile, and also the juxtaposition. Now the juxtaposition is special in itself in that there's only one juxtaposition, and that's the 4-1. The juxtaposition is the way the mandala and way the earth and sun go around, it doesn't happen as often as the other ones do, so it's a less common type of profile. Based on human design, the juxtaposition is considered to have a more fixed destiny. So if you look at the left angle profile, we have people who are here for other people, and how they learn, it's all about relationships. Once again, based on theory, there is considered to be some level of karma that anybody with a left angle profile is always giving to people. That could be small or big based on the interactions, but that's what the human design says, and it is considered to be more fated, as in their destiny is a little bit more fixed. Now, when you have a right angle profile, you have a little bit more of an ability to have some flexibility. Now, again, everybody has their beliefs on destiny, fate, and that kind of thing. I'm just telling you how it is in human design and the theory in human design. If that doesn't seem like that's something that you're aligned with, that's absolutely fine. Regardless of what you believe or don't believe, the profiles do have a lot of information about how you operate in the world, and they still have quite a bit of value in any human design reading. But as I said, the right angle is all about learning about the self and not as much about the relationships. It doesn't mean you don't get in relationships, but you do learn a lot about yourself. And when you think about yourself in a relationship, you look at how do you interact and how does it change you, as opposed to a left angle is really about the relationship and what they can learn about the relationship that they're in. So that's just something that shows the different categories of the specific profiles. Now let's get into the actual profiles and just do a really quick, brief summary of each one. Now, the profile numbers come from the personality lines and also the design lines. Now, if you see, I have it circled here. So it says that it's 54-1 and 53-1, and on the other side it's 57-3. So what that says, it's a 1-3 profile. The one part of the profile is something that we're more aware of, the more conscious part of our design, and then the other part is the design part. And I know the words are a little bit weird in that it's hard to describe them without using the words like personality and design, but I'm just trying to show you where the actual numbers come from. So the design side is the more unconscious numbers, and this part of our profile generally we become more aware of, or even our body graph we become more aware of when we get older or after the age of 40, but other people can see this in us. And Ra Uru would call this binary consciousness, because we have the personality side, which is a part of us that we're very aware of, that we feel that's who we are, but then we may not necessarily know much about the design part of us, or the unconscious part of us, the part of us that other people know about us. And so that's why he would talk about what you believe you are and what you really are. So that's the difference. And so that's where the personality and design come together and give us a profile. So again, the first number will be something that we're more aware of, and the second number will be something that we're less aware of until after sort of the age of 40. The first profile that we have is the 1-3, and that's the investigating experimenter. Now, human design lingo, you would see the investigator, martyr. I don't really care for the word martyr, so I just figure that we can just change it to experimenter, because ultimately that's what you do in this profile. The energy is, the first line is someone who likes to get into information, trying to, collect as much information as you can, and then once you've collected the information, then you go out and experiment with this. So there is a lot of investigating and experimenting in this energy, and that's something that's a theme of your life, where you're always trying to figure things out. This is a right angle profile, so it's more a self-involved. So the experimenting and investigating is really about you and figuring out how you factor into the big world, and how are you growing, and how do these experiments affect you in your life. This information can also be used to help other people, so that the experiments that worked for you or didn't work for you, you can give that valuable information to other people, and they can sort of learn by your trials and the things things that you've learned and the things that have worked and the things haven't worked, and it's valuable information that other people can benefit from. So some people who have experimental energy may feel that they have made a lot of mistakes in your life, but ultimately every so-called mistake is really just a learning opportunity so that you can bring that information and show the world or whoever you want to, or even show just yourself, that what works and what doesn't work. And the thing about this energy is, because there is a tremendous amount of investigation that's done before the experimenting, there can be more time between the investigating and the experimenting. And so there's more information that you're working with before you're actually going out and experimenting with it. And in the long run, this can be more beneficial to you. So we're talking about the 1-4 profile. We're talking about, again, the investigation. And then we also have the fourth line, which is about the opportunist. Now, when we talk about an opportunist, we're talking about people who have a lot of friends or a lot of groups that they connect with, and they get their opportunities through these groups. Somebody with a fourth line profile is going to be somebody who has this want or need to have some level of stability, because if you can imagine, for a fourth line or four corners of a house, it's more of a structured existence. This is somebody, when you have a fourth line, it really does talk about somebody who doesn't want to be pushed into anything, who really wants to be taken for who they are, and also just accept it for exactly what they have to give. And you take your time and you're very deliberate with the changes you make in your life. And changes can sometimes be difficult because you do build this foundation, and leaving that foundation can be kind of scary, or it can be difficult. But the thing about the fourth line energy is that usually you'll build a new opportunity before you finish off with with something else that you're doing. So usually you're always building a new opportunity so that you can move to that. And that can happen with relationships, with friendships, with jobs, and all the opportunities in your life. And this too is a right angle profile. So in other words, this is a personal experience on how the world affects you and how you feel in the world. When we're talking about a 2-4 profile, we're talking about a profile that is actually very good in their idea that the second line is all about being called out, or sort of being asked to show your talents to the world, whatever they are. And the fourth line is all about opportunities. And as we talked about, it's all about building a foundation. It's all about having a lot of connections, a lot of friend groups, and a lot of organizations that you're a part of. You know a lot of people. So when you think about it, you have this stable foundation of people and opportunities that come from the people who you know, but you're also being called out about these opportunities. The second line is the hermit energy, the energy that likes to be alone to process what's going on in their life. And given on their own defenses, sometimes somebody really likes to be a hermit and they like to sort of go off and just be alone, and even the fourth line can be like this sometimes too. But because of the second line energy, you're always going to be sort of not forgotten. There are certain profiles that if you sort of fall off and you're not talking to anybody, and nobody has seen you for a while, nobody may actually be looking for you because it's not the nature of your energy. But with the second line energy, people are actually looking for you. If you drop off and you're not doing something, or you don't show up to parties that you always went to, people are going to go, well, where are you? Why are you not here? So that's the kind of energy. And so the hermit is a way they're working on their own things. They're doing what they want to do. Then the fourth line is making the opportunities, building the foundation. Again, it's the same concept of take me as I am, love me as I am, and don't try and change me. And there's deliberate changes and slow changes that come because of this foundation. And because the second line is really more of a hermit energy, you can have the fourth line, which is someone who doesn't want to go out either. But there's this energy of once you get out, you feel really happy because you need that connection. Anybody with a fourth line energy needs some level of connection with people. They need that friend group, or to be part of a group. The hermit doesn't need that as much. So you have this sort of push-pull. The hermit says, no, I want to stay in the house. And the fourth line says, no, I want to go out and meet friends. So the fourth line can get out after it's been called out, get out, enjoy your time with your friends, and then go back home, decompress, and have your hermit time. So it's actually a really nice profile, although there is push and pull because of the being called out energy of it. It actually does work really well together, and it really does put you in the right places at the right time, being called out for your talents. And this is a right angle profile as well. So again, an individual experience. And now we get into the 2-5 profile. Again, hermit, heretic. I've written it here, but also teacher, because I prefer teacher to heretic. Heretics just doesn't sound very nice. So if you have a 2-5 profile, we're building back on the same idea of having this natural talent. We're also building on the idea that you're being called out for this natural talent. Now, when you have a 5th line energy, this is where we get into a projection field. Now, we're talking about a projection field. We are talking about a perceived vision of who you are. So in other words, you can potentially be a chameleon of sorts, where you are being a different person based on all the different people that you're hanging out with. So in this friend group, you're this person. In that friend group, you're that person. And so there can be this chameleon quality to somebody with a 5th line profile. This is less conscious because it's the 2nd line in this profile, so you may not see it. The other thing about the projected energy is that people see you wherever you go. You're very noticed. Anybody who has a 5th line energy is going to be noticed wherever they go. They can't just kind of slip into a room and not be noticed. Everybody will turn their heads when they walk into the room. Again, the energy. The 5th line energy is a teacher energy, and what that is all talking about is as a 5th line energy, you are breaking down the concepts that other people may not understand, and in doing so, you're showing people, you're universalizing the information so more people can get a grasp of the information that you know. So you're teaching people these concepts, breaking them down and saying, okay, this is how it all looks. So the thing about the 5th line energy is, if we go back to the whole projection field, we're talking about an energy that is an expectation of what you can bring to the table. Authenticity in all you say and do, being the true you at all times as much as possible, even if you want to maybe change who you are so that you can feel accepted, will always work to your benefit. Because when you bring your authentic self to the table, you are saying, this is who I am, and this is what you can expect from me. The problem with the problems that arise with the 5th line energy is when you try to sort of become someone you're not so that you can be accepted. And when this happens, then people have these expectations that don't line up with what you actually can give to them. And if you are getting in a projection field, or you're having people expect things that you actually are not able to deliver, and you never could deliver, but for some reason people believe that's the case because you were trying to be accepted and appreciated, then what can happen is that you can hide away. So we have a 2nd line, which is all about the hermit energy, which really likes to be away from people. And when somebody with a 5th line energy is getting in the wrong projection field, or people are expecting things that you can't deliver, and you sort of get villainized for not bringing what you promised, or what they perceive you as promising to the table, then you can hide away. But because of the 2nd line energy, eventually you will be called back out to share your talent with the world, because the 5th line is all about sharing. But the key of every 5th line energy is to always to be true as you can be to who you are at the core of your being. And when you are, then people will see you and know exactly what you have to give to the world. Now we're going on to the 3-5 profile. Now 3-5 profile, martyr, experimenter, heretic, teacher, 2 heavy-duty words. And so when we're talking about a 3rd line, we're talking about somebody who's experimenting with life, somebody who's trying this and trying that. How does this work? How doesn't it work? What works for if I do this, what will I get? If I do that, what will I get? There's this level of always experimenting with life, and life is everything. Life is relationships. Life is jobs. Life is where you live, what you eat. It's an experiment of pretty much everything. And then you have a fifth line energy, and this is all about the projection field. This is all about where you are, people are expecting you to be a specific representation based on what they believe that you can give them. Now, you have to remember, because you're experimenting, a lot of times people will expect you to deliver the goods or to share what you know before your experiments are even completed. And because of this, there could be some miscommunications where you're still actually in the middle of your experiment. You're still figuring things out, and someone's saying, well, show me how. And then you get in trouble because you don't have all the information that you need. So the thing about the third line energy is it's all about knowing that these experiments are extremely valuable. And if you can't sort of go out and start sharing right away, it's okay. Continue to do your experiments, to do those kind of things, because the kind of information that you're learning is extremely valuable for the rest of the world. We can learn from somebody with a 3-5 profile or a third line profile of any kind, you know, how things work. And it prevents us from having to get into dicey situations because someone in the third line has said, oh yeah, I did that and this is what works, so I'm going to say don't do that. And so they can tell us. So there is so much value there. And as long as somebody with a 3-5 profile is getting in the correct projection field, or they're getting in a projection field, which is, and when we're talking about projection field, we're talking about where you're being expected to actually deliver a certain item. And the item is something that's sort of you're kind of giving off, and it has to really line up with what you can give. And when it lines up with what you can give, so if you're promising to sell something, not that this is a sales energy, but if you're promising to deliver a package and the package that you deliver is nothing like people are expecting, then that's when you're in the wrong projection field. But when you're being your authentic self and you're saying, you know, this is what I have, this is what I've learned, what you can give is very valuable. The thing about somebody with a 3-5 profile as well is that there could be this idea that there's always something better on the other side of the experiment. So this can be the energy of jumping in and jumping out of relationships. It could be the energy of experimenting with relationships, experimenting with jobs. So there could be a lot of changes in jobs. There could be a lot of changes in relationships. There could be a lot of changes in friend groups. And if you keep in mind that this is part of the process, this is part of the energy, this is part of you, there's nothing wrong with this energy, this is exactly what you're meant to do, then it gets a little easier, because a lot of people with the 3-5 energy have felt that they've bumped up a lot of times against walls and things have been tough. This energy does get a little bit more stable, or the experimenting kind of comes down a little bit more after the age of 40. So usually there's a more settling in of the energy. But ultimately, the experiments that you do are extremely important to the rest of the world. And if you can have confidence that whatever you're doing is not a mistake, and that the only way to learn is to try things out, and to understand that that's part of your design, that's part of your energy, then hopefully it will make it a little bit easier for you in your life trajectory. And the fifth line energy will always be noticed, so it's not like you can slip into a room and not be noticed. And this is also a right angle profile, so a more personal expression of the life. Now we're talking about the 3-6 profile. We're talking about, for the first 30 years of someone's life, it means you're experimenting doubly, because anybody who carries a sixth line, the sixth line energy is all about 3-phase life. The first phase is from birth until about 28, 29, and that's usually around the Saturn return. The second phase is about 28 to 29 to about 50, 51, and that's when you have your what they call the on the roof stage. And then you have, after 51, you have your Chiron return, and this is where you sort of step into your role model status. So when the first 30 years of your life, when we look at the sixth line, we're looking at it as a third line. So ultimately this would be like a 3-3 profile. Third line is all about experimenting. The third line is all about looking at all the different ways that things can happen. Experimenting with life, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. This can be in relationships, jobs, this can be pretty much in everything in your life. And if you imagine that you're doing double experimenting with life, with everything, because for the first 30 years of your life, before you actually have this so-called roof stage where you sort of step back from all the things you learned, all the things you experimented with, and sort of integrate what you learned so that as the time passes, you can figure it all out and then become the role model, or by being yourself, you show how others, how they can be themselves as well. The sixth line energy is really about just walking the walk at the end of the Chiron return. After the Chiron return, it's just walking the walk of who you are. You're not trying to teach anybody anything. You're just being the fullest expression of who you are. And because of that, other people are looking at you and saying, oh, they're being themselves, and because of that, I can be myself as well. It's like you're just become the embodiment of who you are, and it's not like you have to be anything but who you are. Again, there's an experimenting in life, and you're going to continue experimenting even after your Chiron return, because ultimately this is all about who you are, and your experiments are the things that will teach others what works and what doesn't work. That's the whole point of the third line energy. It's to help people and to share the information that this is what works and this is what doesn't work. And so when you're a 3/6, you're a role model for experimenting, and that experimenting can change as you get older and as you mature, but it will always be a part of who you are no matter what. And somebody with a 3/6 profile is somebody who is going to have an abundance of information on what works and what doesn't work, and really someone who's a really valuable resource for the world in general. And the 3/6 profile is a personal profile or a right angle profile as well. So it's a personal experience. So life is a personal experience. And the juxtaposition, the 4/1, we have the fourth line. Now, the thing about the 4/1 energy is somebody who is building a foundation or building opportunities or building a friend group or some level of stability. But then after they build the stability, then they investigate it. So what happens is there could be potential for building things that once you've built it, or once you have this foundation, or this type of structure, now you're saying, well, now that I've sort of looked into it, I don't really like it. So there could be this whole situation where you're actually doing something and then you figure out, and that's how you learn, and that's exactly the right way for you. And just like all fourth line energy, it is really about understanding that this is a fixed type of energy. And with the 4/1, because it is a juxtaposition, there is a theory in human design that this is a more fixed sort of destiny, or a fixed way of living your life through, and you have more of a definitive way that life will show up for you. When you have a fourth line energy, any fourth line, you're always going to be slow to change direction, or there's a potential for you to want to take your time before you start to make changes, or before you go and start a new job, or to leave the stability that you've built. Although the investigation, if it turns out to be something that you're not specifically happy with, there could be this idea that you're more likely to want to be shifting out of that thing that you've built. But there's always going to be this level of taking your time to switch or to change direction, as well as the concept that you are who you are, and you'd rather not be pushed by anybody trying to change who you are. And if somebody really loves you, they will accept you for the full embodiment of who you are. And if people don't like it, then that's their problem, and they're probably not somebody that you don't want in your life anyway. Because there's a lot of foundation building, and foundation building takes a lot of time to do. Again, there's a slow moving energy. This is somebody who is deliberate and determined and takes their time potentially for any decisions that they make. And of course, we have to remember that the profile is just one part of the whole body graph. If we have somebody who's got a lot of emotional definition, and they want to jump in and do things much quicker, or they go by their emotions and their decisions, then you might see a little difference in the way the fourth line energy works. But ultimately, this is all about a destined or a fixed destiny, and somebody who needs to build the foundation, build the opportunities, and the opportunities they get usually come from their friend group or the foundation that they've built. And there is a fair bit of investigation, but that usually comes after the actual foundation is built. And as I said, this is a juxtaposition profile, so a very unique and individual and unusual profile that doesn't happen all the time. So basically, people who have this energy are very unique in how they act and interact in the world. So now when we go to the 4-6 profile, we're having somebody who's the opportunist role model. So we have somebody who's all about connections, all about take me as I am, love me as I am. It's all about knowing a lot of people and having a lot of groups that you interact with. Many of your opportunities can come from the groups that you interact with. The 6 line profile is all about 3 stages of life. So we have 0 to 28, 29, and that's when you have what's considered your experimental phase in life, where you decide, you figure out what works and what doesn't work in your life, and how you interact with it all, and you're learning as much as you can in those first 30 or so years, or 28 to 29 years, up until your Saturn return. And then when you hit your Saturn return, you go to the next phase of your life, and that's all about being on the roof, and that's where you integrate all the things you've learned. Now, because you have a 4th line energy as well, we're talking about somebody who has this energy to have a lot of friends, to be social. And yes, there is that pulling away. When you've had enough friends for a while, you need to sort of decompress and get your time alone as well. That's part of the 4th line energy. But you also have to remember, when you're in the 6th line, when you're in the roof stage, there is a lot of pulling back and sort of really thinking about what you did in those first 30 or so years and how it affected you and what can you use from it, especially when there's so much experimenting that you might have done in those years. And then the 4th line is saying, let's go out and meet people and get our opportunities. So you have a lot of push pull. So somebody who's a 4-6 profile who's on the roof could have a little bit of this push pull, where they want to do something and they're feeling lonely and they want to interact with people, but then the 6th line part of it saying, no, we don't want to interact, we want to be up here on the roof, we want to observe the world, we want to integrate what we've learned. So it can be difficult sometimes for somebody with a 4-6 profile to be on the roof and to be away from the fray of life. But the whole point of this energy is to really understand the connections of people, life. That's the role model. You're finding, you're discovering the bonds and connections of the world, and this is the role model energy, where you're coming out and you're being the embodiment of who you are. And sort of who you are is based on the bonds and connections that you have made and what you've learned from that. And so when you become the role model after your Chiron return at 50 years old or thereabouts, then you're getting to the point where you're starting to interact in a way where you're feeling that you're just being you, and the way you interact is incorporating all the things you've learned and all the connections that you've made in your whole life, and using that in a way that you're just being exactly who you are. You're being a role model for how connections are formed, for how bonds are made, for how opportunities come into the world. And this is the kind of energy that you bring into the world when you get off the roof, or when you go through your Chiron return. And the thing about this energy is, again, this is a right angle profile, and it is sort of in between, going between the right angle and the left angle. So some people say that they feel it's more of a left angle profile because it's getting so close to the edge, but it is considered technically a right angle profile. And in that way, it's a personal experience in life. So when we have a 5-1 profile, we're moving into the left angle profile. So we're moving into an energy that people are learning what they need to learn from this lifetime through relationships. The fifth line energy is all about being in a projection field. And when we talk about a projection field, we are talking about this energy of an expectation. People are projecting what they think that somebody with a fifth line energy can bring to the table. Now, sometimes the people who are carrying this energy, this person with a fifth line energy, doesn't exactly have the same perspective as the people who are projecting what they believe that this person can give them. So in other words, the person with a fifth line energy doesn't necessarily have what they think, what other people think they can give. And because of this, there can be some miscommunications, and the fifth line energy can be somebody who's getting sort of villainized for not bringing to the table what they said or implied that they could give, and that is not necessarily the case. The fifth line energy may not have even said that they could bring something to the table, yet that's the projection field they're in. Being in the wrong projection field, or in a place where people are expecting you to be or say or do something that is not in integrity with you, is something that can happen when, instead of being your true authentic self, you're trying to fit in, or you're trying to be what other people want you to be, which is a really common thing for somebody with a fifth line energy, especially when it's the fifth line in the 5-1, because the fifth line is very conscious, and you know exactly how you are, sort of almost in a fishbowl where people expect you to be a certain way. But if there's anything to learn from somebody with a fifth line energy, it's all about the understanding that you have to be exactly who you are to be authentic, and there will be people who will like that part of you, or they will like what you have to give, and then there will be people who don't. And the people who don't like what you have to give are the people that are not in your projection field, or the people that are not the right people for you in your life. So ultimately, if you can be the truest embodiment of who you are, because there is this real ability to become a chameleon, to be whatever anybody wants you to be, and almost get lost in that whole drift of exactly where you stand and where you really are in who you are as an individual, because you're so lost in the fray of trying to be everything to everybody. And stepping back and saying, okay, this is who I am and this is what I have to give. And then when you do that, people get on the same page as you, and what you have to give and what you have to offer is exactly what people are expecting you to offer. The fifth line energy is an energy that anywhere you go, you'll always be noticed. And if you see an image of somebody with a fifth line, usually that person is somebody who's striking, and it doesn't have to be about beauty or handsome or anything like that. It's just this striking sort of energy that they exude, and you can and your eyes are sort of drawn to them. The one part of the profile is all about investigation or data collection. So somebody who's a fifth line energy, 5-1, they're saying, okay, I can share something, I can teach something, but based on what I teach is what I will investigate. What will I figure out? What do people need? So anybody with a 5-1 energy is somebody who's great to actually be out there giving people what they need. And if you're coming with a level of integrity and authenticity, you will be giving people what they expect you to give, and what you can 100% deliver. But when you get to the point where you're trying to deliver something that you actually can't deliver, that's when you get in trouble. And if somebody with a fifth line energy gets in trouble where they're having people expect or project certain expectations on them, that they can hide away and not really want to interact with people, because you're always getting blamed for things that you haven't said or done. If we go back to the whole concept of being authentic, and even if you can be a chameleon, I mean, that certainly works. Like if you're doing acting or things like that, that's a really wonderful skill to have. But as long as you can, get in touch with who you are and who you want to be seen as, and just keep bringing that person forward, then things will turn out in a better way, and people will get what they're expecting, and you'll be happy, and they'll be happy, and everybody will get exactly what they want. And the thing about somebody who has a left angle profile is we're talking about somebody who's here to give karma to pretty much everybody who they meet. And the karma can be something as simple as just walking down a street and making eye contact with somebody, or something more extensive in that you have a relationship with somebody. But it is a more fixed or fated destiny based on human design theory. Now we go to the 5-2 profile. Now we're still going into the fifth line, and the fifth line is always going to be noticed wherever they go. The thing about the fifth line energy is it's all about authenticity and really providing the information or the product or whatever you are perceived to be able to give, to provide what you can give. And when you can give what people are projecting or what people actually think that they can get from you, then you're in the right projection field. But many times with the fifth line energy, people can be seeing something or seeing that you can give, or sort of projecting their ideas or concepts or what they think you can give onto you. And when they do that, then you get in this position where people are blaming you or saying, oh, well, you said you could give this and you didn't. So when this happens, somebody with the fifth line energy can go and hide away because they just get frustrated or tired, and they just don't want to be villainized for something that they didn't feel like they've done anything wrong. When that happens, you also have the second line energy. The second line energy is all about hermiting away, being quiet and being alone and being happy to be alone, which can really work well with the fifth line energy when the fifth line energy has been sort of, made to be to feel like you didn't provide what you wanted. You're feeling blame for something you didn't do, and you just think, yeah, I'm just gonna get away from all of this. So because of that, the 5-2 energy can be almost one of the most invisible energies, or the person who is hidden away from the world. And they do come with a talent, as anybody who has a second line energy or the second line profile is coming with some level of talent. And the second line is all about being called out. So even though somebody with a 5-2 energy, which is a fairly rare profile, when they are away from the fray, they are going to be called out. They're not going to be forgotten because of the second line energy. The second line energy will go, oh, where's so-and-so? I don't see them anymore. And they'll be called out to show their talent. Somebody with a 5-2 profile has a tremendous amount of leadership energy. And because there's a lot of leadership energy with the fifth line, but then you also, you marry that with the second line, which comes with a level of talent. And you have somebody who's got a lot of talent and a lot of leadership. And they also are a teacher, and they're universalizing concepts, or they're bringing concepts and breaking them down so that more people can understand them. So this is somebody with a tremendous amount of talent, a tremendous amount of leadership. But the thing about it is to always be authentic in everything they say and do, so that people are on the same page, so that they get on the right projection field, so people expect what somebody with a fifth line energy is ready to give. And when this happens, then somebody with a 5-2 profile can shine in the way they want to shine. And then once they do, they'll want to go back and spend some time alone, because that hermit energy really needs to get their space and time alone as well. And that's sort of where they get away, and they sort of get that energy boost that they need by being away from people. A 5-2 energy, to be their best self, needs to have a balance of alone time and a balance of time being out and being the leader and the teacher. And when they get that, then they're going to feel their best self. And the thing about this energy is it's a left angle profile. So in other words, this is a karmic energy, and it is all about giving karma to everyone you meet. And this could be just meeting somebody and, a little bit of eye contact and you move on, or something more in depth like a relationship. But karma is a big part of the left angle profile, and it is a destined, or there's a more fated trajectory of the life. So now that we get into the 6-2 profile, we're talking about somebody who is a conscious role model, somebody who feels potentially that they have something big to do in the world. And anybody with a 6-line energy would be considered somebody who's a late bloomer, because we have someone who's having 3 stages in their life. The first stage is 0 to 28 to 29, or 0 until they're their Saturn return, the second stage is what we consider someone who's going on the roof. And when somebody goes on the roof, they sort of get detached from the world around them, and they integrate all the experiments they did, because for the first years of their life, the first 29 to 30 years of their life, somebody is with a 6-line profile is going to be experimenting with what works and what doesn't work. And because of this, we have somebody who has had a few knocks in their life. As anybody who's an experimental energy will understand, that you're not always going to have experiments work exactly the way you want to, and you're going to have some knocks or some raps on your fingers as life goes on. When you're integrating, when you get on the roof, somebody with a 6-2 energy is usually pretty happy to be on the roof, because the 6th line is all about being in that middle stage where they're detached from society. And the 2nd line, which is a hermit energy, which loves to be away from everybody and loves to be away from the fray, is very happy to be up on the roof. So sometimes when their Chiron return comes at the age of 50 or 51, when somebody who has a 6-line profile is considered to have their final role model status, or they step into that final stage of being a role model, they don't want to come off the roof, because it's been so comfortable and warm and cozy up on that roof, and it's so nice not to have to interact with people. But they have to come down just like everybody else, because their role model, their status is to become a role model, to be the embodiment of who they are. And by being who they are, they encourage other people to be who they are. And not only that, because a person with a 6-2 profile carries the 2nd line, there's always going to be some level of talent that somebody with this energy brings to the table. And the 6th line energy, as well as being a hermit, is also about the concept of being alone and sort of needing to have their space and time alone, because this actually gives them the energy to be able to be out in the world. So somebody with a 2nd line energy will always need to have some quiet time, alone time, to recharge their batteries. And after they've recharged their batteries, usually what will happen is they will be called out. The 6-2 energy is somebody who will not be forgotten. When they disappear from the scene, or they're not doing going to the places where they usually go, or they're sort of pulling out of everything, people will notice it, and people will say, hey, where's so-and-so? I don't see them. And they'll be called out to show their talent. And the talent that comes from being a role model is something that just comes naturally. They're just going about their business. They're living their life. They're doing what they want to do. They're feeling their best. And because of that, they're showing other people how to feel their best, other people how to be exactly who they are, and not have to worry about, trying to be or say or do something that is not exactly theirs. There is a lot of optimism with somebody with a 6-line energy, but because of the experimental stage, this optimism can take a few hits, and sometimes people with a 6-2 energy can become pessimistic, and they can see the way humanity is and how that humanity could be so much better, because there's this almost inner knowing about what humanity can do and be. And so if they can sort of shake that off and just get out in the world and just go about their business and do what they're meant to do, they'll have the experience of what they're meant to do, and that's to be a role model for everybody else. And the being energy will be transmitted to everybody around them. And then when they need to take the break, they'll go in and do their hermitage, and then they'll come back out and do it all over again. The 6-2 profile is a left angle profile, which means it's a karmic profile. And it means that everybody that they meet in their lives, even if they're just meeting them for a blink of a second, is somehow receiving karma from somebody with this profile. And it is more of a fated destiny for anybody with a left angle profile as well. And we're talking about the 6-3 profile, the last profile of them all. We also have somebody who is a role model as well as an experimenter. But when we think about the 6th line, comes in 3 different stages. The first stage is from birth until about 28 or 29, or the Saturn return. And this is all about experimenting with life, seeing what works and what doesn't work. And you also have to remember that there's also the 3rd line. So this is someone who is literally experimenting doubly, because for the first 30 or so years of their life, they're experimenting on both lines. So when they get on the 2nd stage of the role model, when they get to the on the roof stage, which is from about 28, 29 to about 51 when they have their chiron return. There's a lot to integrate, but because of the experimental nature that still remains, because they're a third line no matter what, even when the sixth line becomes the second part and goes into this integration phase, we're still having somebody who's continuing to experiment. And what happens is they go up on the roof and then they experiment with coming off the roof, and then they go back up on the roof and you can experiment with coming off the roof. It can be what is considered a very chaotic energy, but this chaotic energy is really what brings their role model energy to the table, because the role model energy of a 6-3 profile is somebody who's coming and showing people how to experiment with life but keep getting up, and it's how to bang into the walls of life but keep getting back up and keep seeing what the benefit of everything was. Why did this happen? Why was it important for me to learn this? What can I share with the world? And by being this the embodiment of themselves, by being this person who has experimented with life and is showing you how it all works and continues to experiment with life until for their whole lifetime, they are showing people how it can be done. And because of this, they can be wonderful for crisis management. They can bring chaos to order. And they are probably one of the most experienced person with the abundance of knowledge that they've learned from all their experiences. This profile is not a common profile, so there's not many people who have it. It's more rare. All of the role model energy have some level of looking for their soulmate, or the consensus is, or the feeling is that, based on the theory of human design, is that everybody who comes in with a 6-line energy has a soulmate that it comes in at the same time. Whether you believe this or not is not really, if that's not your belief, that's completely fine, but that's what is said. So when you have somebody with a 6-3 profile, you have somebody who is experimenting with relationships as much as they're experimenting with everything else. And so this whole soulmate thing may be more of a longing, but maybe it is more difficult to actually find that, or to make that happen before they go up on the roof, because the energy of a 6 line generally wants to take a soulmate or somebody up with them on the roof. So when they come off the roof, a lot of people after their Chiron return, when they go into their full role model status, can get married, or because if they hadn't had a soulmate to come up with them, or hadn't had a partner to come up with them, or they might get divorced because they realize that the person that they took up on the roof with them wasn't exactly who they wanted to. Somebody with a 6-3 profile will continue to experiment with life, and yes, the experimenting that they do will probably kind of get a little more settled, and maybe it won't be so intense as it was in the first part of their life, but it will always be part of their profile, and it is always going to be who they are. And if a person accepts that this is always going to be part of who you are, and the reason why you're doing all this experimenting is because it is for the greater good of everybody else's, so that what you've learned can be transmitted to other people, so that they can learn from all the experiments and all the things and all the knocks and the things that you've done, so that others don't have to work through the experiments like you did, and they can get the benefits without having to have or do the experiments that you've done for them. So anybody with a 6-3 profile is going to be an abundance of information, abundance of knowledge, and someone who can really tell you the stories of what does work and what you should just steer clear of. The 6-3 profile is another one of the left angle profile, a karmic profile, meaning that everybody that somebody with a 6-3 profile meets is somebody that they will give karma to. Again, it could be someone who they meet just for a second. They have this exchange of karma, and it's an energy. It's not something that anybody has to do. It's all about energy exchange, and it's got nothing to do with anything you do or say or anything like that. And it could be a longer interaction where the karma is given as well, but ultimately is a more fated and a more destined life. And if you've been following all along, you'll see that I wasn't lying when I said there is a tremendous amount of information. I've already talked so much, and we haven't even hit the centers yet. What that says is that human design can give us so much information about who we are and how we operate. And that's why it's so important for more and more people to know.